Hi, everybody. Okay, so last time we were talking about active immunity. That is when your white blood cells encounter a protein that it doesn't recognize, an antigen, it learns to make antibodies and tears it apart. And once it knows how to do that, it knows for a very long time, if not permanently. So that's active immunity. That's where you actively make antibodies. It is also possible to be passive about this and receive antibodies. Now, the natural way that happens often is that a pregnant woman will pass antibodies to her fetus, and when the baby is born, the baby will have immunity to all the things that mom knew how to make antibodies to, which is great because when the baby's first born, it's very vulnerable, and all the things that mom has ever been exposed to and knows how to make the antibodies to, baby is immune to. The problem is that mom passes the antibodies but doesn't pass the knowledge how to make them. So once those antibodies break down, the baby cannot replace them, and the baby is going to grow up and be exposed to things and get sick and learn to make antibodies for him or herself. So this isn't active. The baby doesn't actively make these antibodies. It's given to the baby. We actually do this in medicine as well. We have situations where the antibodies are given to somebody and they don't know how to make them themselves. And it's a temporary immunity. It's a treatment, but it doesn't allow the person to be immune forever. And a perfect example of where this is done is in COVID. In COVID-19, as the struggle has unfolded for a vaccine, and at the time I'm recording this, we do not have a vaccine, but we do have what's called convalescent plasma. That is the antibodies taken from someone who's been infected, who now knows how to make the antibodies against COVID. Taking those antibodies from that person, here's a person donating their blood, and the antibodies are removed. The blood is actually put back in after the antibodies are removed. And then those antibodies are given to somebody who's fighting the disease, and those antibodies will help that person who's sick destroy the virus. It's not permanent, and so it won't last forever. And there are some other issues with COVID, and it's not just a question of killing the virus. So it isn't always effective in treating the disease. And we also don't know, at this point that I'm recording this, we don't know if COVID antibodies confer any kind of long-term immunity. So it's experimental, but it is a perfect example where we're taking the antibodies that one person makes and giving them to someone else to attack that virus. That person that receives them does not gain the knowledge how to make those antibodies, so the immunity is not permanent. It's passive immunity. It happens to the person. So we have active immunity where you make the antibodies. You have passive immunity where they're given to you. I have made up a term. This is not to be found anywhere else, but I've made up a term for a third type of immunity, and I've called it hyperactive immunity. Sometimes people make antibodies against something that they don't need to fight. Consider for a moment, what goes into your body that is a foreign protein your white blood cells will not have seen that you don't want them to attack? Food, perfumes, lots of things that go into your body that are harmless, that aren't going to make you sick. And you don't want your white blood cells to attack them because you also make some other chemicals when you do that called histamines that make you swell up and other things that help you normally fight infection. But if you're not infected, if something's coming into your body that isn't harmful, and you start to make antibodies against it and make histamine in order to better deal with it, you're going to be having all the feelings that you have when you're sick, but you're not sick and there's nothing hurting your cells. That is called an allergy. When you're allergic to something, it is your body reacting to harmless antigens. Normally, You don't react to that. You suppress that. Your white blood cells are stopped from doing that. But some people sometimes can't stop their white blood cells from making these antibodies. They do make the antibodies. They make the histamine, and they have what's called an allergic reaction. They are making antibodies against harmless antigens. That includes that histamine that causes the swelling. One other thing that I want to talk about related to immunity. So we have active immunity, passive immunity, allergies, or hyperactive immunity. Don't use that term. That's my made-up term, but it is fitting. Is another situation where you have what's essentially an allergy. Reacting to proteins that are foreign, that are harmless. It's a very special situation. Imagine that my kidneys are failing. They're not working, and I need a kidney transplant, and somebody is willing to give me a kidney, okay? And they go into surgery and have their kidney removed, and I go into surgery and they put the kidney in. Am I going to recognize all the proteins on that kidney? No, I'm not. And what am I going to do? My white blood cells are going, wah, wah, wah. Oh no, there's foreign proteins. And I am going to make antibodies to attack the kidney. Do I want to attack the kidney? Heck no, somebody was kind enough to donate it to me, right? So a transplant, which is a wonderful medical thing to be able to get when you need an organ, when you get a transplant, you have the problem of rejecting the organ. That is your immune system responding to it by attacking it by making antibodies. There are chemicals that you can take called immune suppressant, which means to push down the immune system. So if you're getting a kidney or a heart or any other kind of transplant, you're likely to get immunosuppressants, a chemical that slows down your immune system so that you don't attack those organs. Of course, there's a problem with that, right? What happens if you suppress your immune system? You're going to get sick and not be able to fight diseases. So somebody who is getting an organ, also getting an immunosuppressant, has to be really, really careful about not being exposed to pathogens, because those will be very, very detrimental to them. The other thing that we do when we get kidney transplants or heart transplants or any transplants is we look for a match. And what that means looking for an organ that will have as many of the same proteins as possible, so that you're less likely to react against it and attack it and reject it. So there's the matching and trying to find a donor who is a match. That's what that means, that they have similar proteins so that you recognize the proteins and you don't attack them. And then once you get that transplant, you need an immunosuppressant to make sure you don't attack any foreign proteins, that you don't recognize any antigens. And so that's the end of active, passive, and hyperactive immunity.